Hello, everyone. Welcome to my podcast, Hannah Klein's Time. Since this is my first episode, I'd like to introduce myself a little, and later there will be a great guest. I am an author of 3 books, 2 books in English and 1 book in Japanese. I also have my homepage, www.officialhannahklein.com, and I have a blog page there. And I also I post my blog posts. Yeah. I also have used social media like X, Instagram, Threads, Facebook. I'm not very active on Facebook, but it will be posted. There will be posts on Facebook as well. But anyways, please remind yourself that I am a non-Jewish Japanese. I'm not half something. I am Japanese. And there is a reason I chose Klein. My old pseudonym was Hannah K. And more people know with my old pseudonym, I guess, on social media. But I decided to use Klein instead of K. Well, speaking of my young youth, I used to participate in various speech contests. I won speech contests, essay contests. But at some point in my age, I decided that was enough. And speaking English has been a part of my life since I was born. And I just decided to speak English with my friends or my family friends. And also I didn't want to I just didn't want to appear in front of people. But probably, maybe in the future. On this podcast, Hannah Klein's Time, I'd like to raise various topics from foreign policies, political ideologies, democracy, human rights, culture, and more. Well, there was an election. There was a lot of speculation. Mr. Trump is now officially President-elect Trump. After presidential election 2024. I asked around my friends who they are voting for, but I will not talk about it. But I appreciate, though, the fact that President-elect Trump speaks highly of the late Prime Minister Abe, like his friends, in a very friendly manner, I have to say. While the Japanese media tries to dig up Prime Minister Abe's past, which sounds very shameful. U.S. election has always been important, and I have always watched U.S. elections for many, many years. I actually wondered for a while what I would be speaking in the first episode. But I wanted to start the first episode after the election. I would like to talk about the reason why I asked the first guest to appear in this first episode. It goes back to September last year. There's an organization called UNWRA. Well, if you look up UNWRA on Google, you will notice what it is. But anyways, our chief, Lazzarini, came to Japan and said that he would like to have an office of UNWRA in Japan so that UNWRA operates in the East Asia more actively. I was very upset at the news, and I was about to forget about the organization because I was so angry, but I just started to remember why I was angry at UNWRA. It's not like just people see it on social media, really. And also at the same time, back in September, I was learning basic Hebrew from a woman. She's Jewish, and she lives in France. But I would just talk about her that way, because there will be other issues if I talk about her. Then after about 3 weeks, it was October 7th. From the time I opened X, I felt something was wrong. And after a long time of passing, I learned about the terrible, devastating terrorist attack by Hamas, PFLP, and other radical Palestinian Islamists funded by Iran and also funded by UNWRA. It was so, oh my gosh, I just cannot believe. The first moment I learned about it, but I just started to, everything just started to roll back like 10 years, 20 years. And I started to remember all those nightmares that I wanted to forget about ISIS, for example, and the brutal rapes by radical Islamists. And I had such heavy heart before I actually saw the victims' photos. And I was so sorry to learn about what happened. People were burned alive, slaughtered. Women were brutally raped, executed. Well, I was very sad. Israeli people have been very friendly to me, and how would you feel if you have friends and your friends may have experienced this? Like, to Japanese, it's just somewhere else, but it's just, there are unbelievable answers by Japanese, but just forget about it. After I heard and saw the victims, I really could not stop talking about them. It's not about gossiping, but I was talking with various people, and it was very heartbreaking. I was not in the mindset of learning Hebrew, but I just decided to keep on writing and never look away. This time, especially. And also, please remember, regarding the terrorist attack, there has been terrorist attack in Israel. There are heinous terrorist attacks by Palestinian terrorists. I really have to say this, but they are Palestinians. I wrote some comments on X, for example, and there were terrible comments following me, or denying October 7th, like I was funded by AIPAC. I'm not funded by AIPAC, by the way. I wish October 7th had not happened, but it did. Sadly. I feel sincere condolences to the victims of October 7th and the victims of the terror attacks during the war. The victims of the war, and there are hostages in Gaza. They are stolen by Hamas. They stole people. They stole children, women, and men from their families. They need to just return the people. Yeah, and I have to say that it's not since October 7th last year that I have been familiar with Israel or Jewish people. It goes back to my childhood, really. The guest was asking me about this, but yes, it goes back to my 2-year-old period. And I was asking stupid questions to my mother, but but anyways, I recited a story to a renowned medical professor. He was Jewish, and he was famous for terminal care. I often visited him as well, in his residence in the United States, and he often came to Japan to give lectures. And he and his stepbrother stopped by at my mother's house, and we often spent some time together. But so finally, I would like to introduce today's guest. His name is Dr. Ofir Haivry. He is a renowned historian, the vice president of the Herzl Institute, and a member of the Council of Higher Education in Israel. Welcome, Ofir, and thank you for being a guest for today's podcast. Okay, so now I think it's finally working. Yeah, I hope yes, it is. It started to work. Yeah, the microphone reacts a little slowly. I'm sorry. So,
By the way,
uh,
because you are doing it by phone,
mm-hmm.
maybe next time we should organize if we have another one by Zoom, because the problem is that someone might call me. I cannot control it, and then it will be a problem.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry.
I can avoid answering the phone,
Uh-huh.
but still
Yeah.
it takes some.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
let's hope that calls me.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's important.
Okay, let's go on.
So, I what I hear, I actually subscribe to both the Jerusalem Post and the Times of Israel, but they're both in English. But, there are a lot of news media in Israel as well, and they're available in Hebrew, which I cannot understand. And I think that, the information that I hear in, I often hear in the news in English, various, and also I read like New York Times, like Washington Post, other news media, and um, I it, it's terrible. It's a terrible fact, but the Japanese media is not very much covering the Israel side of the story, in my opinion, and especially, for example, I cannot record actually NHK, like the National Broadcasting News, and uh, um, let just use it here, because they have all their rights not to let other people use it. And yeah, and it's a national broadcasting news as well. But
Is NHK
mm-hmm.
owned by the government? Or
It's
is
well
what
funded
kind of?
by, yes, it's own, it's a public broadcasting, like BBC. Yeah, like.
So my view is
Mm-hmm.
that public broadcaster
Mm-hmm.
should not actually have rights
Mm-hmm.
on programs, because it is owned in a way
Mm-hmm.
by all the Japanese people.
Mm-hmm.
So you are also an owner. So
Mm-hmm.
you should be able to use their materials. but it's not up to me. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
In theory, at least.
Yes.
Because they're a public service. If it was private company, then it's another thing. But since they are public service, I think that you and every other because you in a sense you own the company, but that is just like a side comment.
Yes. But you know what? In my opinion, yeah, I very much agree with you because I'm so, it's terrible fact, but they probably think that they're the people of justice, but they make up things, and they are almost like propaganda for they refer to Al Jazeera, for example.
Yeah.
And
but I think that I understand. I think there are two elements. One is that in general, I would say there is an element of the laziness of the foreign media because there is a narrative. So a lot of foreign media, typically the Japanese media, but a lot of foreign media uses the let's say the accepted narrative.
Yes.
That is so this is one element that the correspondents of the NHK and the BBC and the CNN together in one room in Jerusalem, and they are very much influenced one about the other, and they have a certain story that is simply easier. It doesn't depend that much on their let's say view or knowledge or whatever. Another element, which is more specific, I think, is because I guess that the farther away some information is to you, the more you are relying on secondary source. What I mean is probably for media, news that come from Korea or Taiwan or China are very relevant. So the level of information and sources is far higher. But the conflict in, let's say there is some news from Venezuela or Israel or Congo is, something that is regarded as relatively far away. However, the problem is that most news that come to the world, to Japan or to another country, how much do you hear in Japan about Brazil? Maybe you have a story or two here. There is not a lot of news in Brazil. But Israel, relatively to its size, it is like 1 billion people. So I think that this disparity, because we are, very much at the center of things, and so we appear on the news relatively a lot, but we are on the other bit, a bit of a foreign, very foreign to, I would say, mainstream media in Japan. And I would say also another element, which is, I think, common to Japanese media, other media, is that because Israel is a bit of a peculiar society, a lot of times I think that news outfits, they find it easier to tell the simple story and not to go deep. So, for instance, there is an attack today.
Yeah.
They don't try to, what is the source for this 1 year ago or 10. Simply, I would say even more than this. Traditionally, there has been, I would say, two. As far as I can tell, as an outsider, within the Japanese media, two, I would say, sources for addressing Israel, news from Israel or the Middle East. One, I think, both of them are very, I would say, not very. I would say both of them are a bit opportunistic. So one view is Israel is a small country. The Arabs are a lot of wheat, oil, and all these. So, on the one hand, naturally, you would prefer to tend more to the countries that you can maybe find business opportunities or income with. On the other
Well,
hand,
that's one point. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, actually, I'm sorry.
But
Yeah,
I
please go
want
ahead.
to counter this. On the other hand, there is the point that Israel is aligned with America and the West, and
Yes.
Japan sees itself as part of the West. So this, in a certain point, it's another. So there is, on the one hand, this appeal of the Arab world as, but on the other hand, I think that Japan doesn't really want to be, anti-American. So it's kind of finding itself between these two influences, trying to course.
Yeah, but you know what? On October 7th, as I, just wrote to you, it's like, it was so bad. I felt just really terrible. Like, I cannot express how bad. Because one of the reasons was that I got some kind of threats from like ISIS on social media. And they somehow found out, well, they like to like harass people, who are related to
Yes,
U.S. military. But, one day, I was hesitant to talk about this for just years after it really happened, because it was, I was so angry after just it happened. But James Foley, the American photojournalist, was executed, and they sent me a bunch of links, which was shut down. A few hours before I saw, like when I woke up, it was just shut down. Fortunately, I didn't have to see it. But they sent me a bunch of terrible photos and said, this is Islam. Like, this is not, well, like, I would not say this is Islam. Like, this is, well, that's what they are. They are just butcherers. They need to understand, really. They're not, well, I don't know, like, how, Israeli people understand Muslim people. But it's I don't think it's I don't think it's just, it was just too much. And there was
I'm for you. You're describing that you were harassed or threatened by people who are aligned with ISIS, but was this from people that were addressing your English language
yes.
activity or language? Because I guess this word of Japanese language, they have no, they cannot reach it. But they don't know Japanese, English, right?
I had never used actually, I had never used Japanese before 2022, when I got my first Japanese book out. And that was the first time ever. Actually, I had my actual photo of my face, just upload it on my social media. But like, it was very scary for me for years. But I had been using Twitter, from Twitter era, like for more than 10 years. Like 12 years. Like now X, but like I just I just I just don't know what to say about this, but
Yeah,
um
really, my question was,
mhm.
I think that not only relating to you, but in general, I think that the English language media is the place where these discussions and also these harassments occur. I mean, do you have any information about uh, pro-Palestine or Islamists active in the Japanese language media or so on? You understand? I think that doesn't really happen. It's only something that goes on in the
uh,
English language. No?
yeah, that's true. Uh, like people around me, like there are a lot of doctors, lawyers. They're not
Yes.
very knowledgeable about this conflict, but they. I talk about the victims. You know, it's it's horrible to talk about, but
Of course.
uh, I I try to explain what happened. And it's sometimes just wonder. I wonder if it's appropriate or not to describe what happens to women, to a you know young woman, because it's very shocking. But it's really terrible. And yeah, just yeah, I regarding the military, I really cannot talk about it, but well, like I actually just before October 7th, in September, that was the time I started to really, really write about UNRWA, actually. Because I was, that was something that was fading into my mind. I just decided to just, not to get too emotional about it. But, um, about 10 years ago, uh, there was a friend who showed me a lot of information. Well, not insider information, but like what they were singing, you know, and what they were learning. That was about you know kill Jews, burn the Jews. That was like they were singing in the exercises, you know.
Of course.
And, Mr. Lazzarini came to Japan and said, "We're going to build an office in Japan so that we can operate in the East Asia." Like, it's like, shut the up, really. Just go away. It's really like you're the cause of the problem, to me. And I just wrote a bunch of like posts on the social media about how terrible our is, and it is indeed, it's terrible. And I I don't understand why Japanese people do not think that it's a crisis that we may have
Well,
around.
first of all, I think that most people, not only in Japan, but all
Mm.
over the world, don't really understand
Mm.
what's UNRWA. And so, you hear there is some kind of UN authority or
Uh-huh.
UN think that the UN is doing some work, and you assume it's a beneficiary beneficial organization. They assume, they don't know, right? It's it's the UN and so forth. So I think that it's thing to just discuss a bit what UNWRA is actually, because I think most people in the world have no idea that is what this specific organization is. So I think it's important, because to the let's say the private person in Japan, in Europe, he hears there is some kind of UN agency doing work with his, instinctively thinks it's a good thing, right? It's helping poor people. Why not? What's the problem? So we have to understand, first of all, that UNRWA was created a little after the Arab-Israeli War of 1949.
Yes.
And it has existed since that time, and a very peculiar organization, because all other UN activities addressing refugees are actually under another umbrella of the regular UN activity for refugees.
UNHCR, right? Yeah.
Yes. Only the Arab refugees of the Arab-Israeli war are the ones who are treated by UNRWA. So this creates the strange phenomenon that many other crises that occurred in, let's say, 75 years ago have been solved, sort of. So, for example, there was a partition of India between Muslim areas and Jewish areas. That happened between Israel and areas that today are the West Bank or Gaza. Now, where are the refugees from India or from Pakistan? They are integrated into the Indian or Pakistani society. The same Japanese people who lived in Korea or other places, right? They were uprooted after the Second World War. They came to Japan, and now they're Japanese. They're not living in refugee camps anymore. So the question is, how come people, Arabs called Palestinians, are theoretically in refugee camps for 75 years? How come no other refugees in the world, right? You have refugees all over in Eastern Europe, Germans and Hungarians and other peoples and Russians and Poles and so on. All the other refugees somehow magically found themselves a home, and only the Palestinians. Moreover, at the same time that the Palestinian refugee program was created, also many Jews from Arab countries were expelled from those Arab countries.
Oh, yes.
Most of them. So most of them came to Israel. And the minority went over to other countries. Some moved to Germany, to the UK, to France, to the US. And all those people, either those who came to Israel or went to other countries, settled in these new countries, and they're not refugees anymore. After 5-10 years, they become regular citizens of the country. So we have to ask, why are the Palestinians different? And the answer is, to a great extent, UNRWA. UNRWA is an organization that doesn't exist in order to solve the problem of the Palestinian refugees. That is, it does not exist in order to integrate them in other countries, but it actually exists in order to perpetuate the problem, in order to live with people in the refugee. So the problem is this: there are almost no refugees anymore, because the original refugees from 75 years ago, the war between the Arabs, those who remain are people who are 80, 90 years old. How many people are there?
Mm-hmm.
5,000, 6,000, that's it.
Mm.
All the other people, not refugees, but they are the children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren of refugees. But still the UN regards them as refugees. So it would be as if, for example, I would say that today in Japan, 3 million people or 4 million people, because their grandfather came from Korea, they are still refugees. You would say it's crazy. These people are already integrated in Japan. They are regular Japanese citizens. The fact that they were refugees, not they, but let's say their grandfather was 70 years ago, is not relevant anymore. So we have to understand that UNRWA creates a kind of status of perennial refugee that also goes over to the children and grandchildren. So there are now the third or fourth generation that are growing up in refugee camps. And all that is because the Arab countries and the Palestinians and the UNRWA is refusing to say these people should settle and become citizens of the states where they live, be it Jordan, Lebanon, or France, or wherever. So basically, the problem is that UNRWA is not solving the problem of refugees, is perpetuating it. And that is the basic problem that creates the ongoing, I would say, ongoing conflict. Because the conflict between Israel and, let's say, Egypt or Jordan or Syria is a border conflict that can be solved. And the proof is that Israel has a peace with Egypt, and it has a peace with Jordan, and it can have a peace with Syria because there are two countries that have some, let's say, issues that are unresolved, but they can solve them or not solve them, but it's a political issue. However, if you decide that there are millions of people that you are refusing to resettle anywhere, so there are refugees, Lebanese refugees, Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, in refugee camps, and they still live there in refugee camps for 70 or 80 years. The Lebanese government is refusing to give them citizenship. Why? Because their interest of all the Arab countries is they want to leave these people as people without citizenship, without a country, so that they can harass Israel and demand a return to Israel. As if today, Japan would say, no, all the people that came from Korea, we keep them in camp because we want them to go back to Korea after 60 or 70 years, which would be a crazy thing.
Yeah.
So this is the parallel. And the international organization which perpetuates this crazy situation is UNRWA. Because UNRWA exists to perpetuate it. That is why Israel and many other people in the world, and including maybe the Trump administration, is thinking about closing down UNRWA. Because it's an organization that exists to create a problem and not to solve it. It's like saying, UNRWA is like saying that the Yakuza is the police. Not a very good idea. So as long as UNRWA is the organization, there will never be a solution. Because UNRWA is not interested in a solution. It's interested in perpetuating the conflict.
Yes. 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 I learned about it from my friend, who was quite angry about UN. He was actually American, who was involved in the military, and he knew about, what's going on in the border area, what the UN is about, and, now, I am actually really pleased, especially after October 7th. I'm very pleased that President Trump is elected. And I hope that, uh, UNRWA closes down as I wished like 10 years ago. Personally, really.
I would say this. On the one hand,
Hmm.
many people privately say that UNRWA should be closed.
Hmm.
On the other hand, unfortunately, in many cases, people, organizations that exist are somehow perpetuated because there are a lot of people that are receiving salaries
Oh,
and people
yes.
who,
The
so
refugee
a lot of
agencies.
time, exactly. So
Yeah.
a lot of people are making a lot of money out of the agency, right?
Mm-hmm.
People who supply it with food and material and thousands of people who work there. But on the other hand, when there is a terrorist incident, we found out,
Mm-hmm.
not but everyone finds out
Mm-hmm.
that some of the people that work in UNRWA,
Mm-hmm.
they are humanitarian, so-called
Yes.
activists,
Yes.
but they are actually people who are terrorists.
Yes.
So several of the terrorists that conducted the horrors of the 7th October,
Mm-hmm.
and they filmed themselves doing it, they are actually people who are paid by UNRWA.
Mm-hmm.
They are theoretically teachers or doctors or doing other things for UNRWA, but in fact they are terrorists. Not terrorists in the more general sense that you say someone who has very bad ideas and says bad things. I mean,
Yes.
terrorists, someone who goes and he kills people or abducts them or tortures them. And unfortunately, we have video.
Yeah,
From the
I
7th
saw
October,
it. Yeah.
where we see faces of people who are UNRWA employees
Mm-hmm.
participate gleefully in these terrible activities. And indeed, not only in Gaza, but even Lebanon, it turns out that several UNRWA employees in Lebanon were also involved with groups, either Hamas or Hezbollah. So not only you're saying, UNRWA is not helpful, not only UNRWA is perpetuating the problem, but actually you have a problem where part of people in UNRWA are terrorists. So UNRWA is funding terror because it's paying the salary of terrorists, which is a crazy thing. So I hope that the consensus will be that UNRWA has to be closed, and if there are problems with any Arab refugees, Palestinian or otherwise, they should be dealt like any other refugee around the world. There might be refugees now in maybe Venezuela and maybe Ukraine, and there's no reason why Arab refugees from Israel, let's say that should have a special agency only for them.
Yeah. It's very strange, but do you know TBS?
No.
It's a private broadcasting company. It's very, very anti-Semitic.
In what country is it?
In Japan.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's in Japanese, and they don't give service in English, but ambassador, actually, Israeli ambassador to Japan filed an official complaint to the TV station, but
really?
They, for example, invite terrorists who ordered Lod Airport massacre, the Ben Gurion, airport massacre in 1972. She was subject to capital punishment because she committed heinous crime domestically and both internationally. And
yes.
And it's I won't go into the capital punishment, but she deserves it. But she's out. She's out after 22 years, and she says she's sorry, but what I did was not so bad. you know, in front of people, and she was the one. In my impression, those students are like doing Free Palestine movement now, but she was actually fighting with PLO, calling for free Palestine. She was the one who was screaming around, this agenda, and I do not understand why Japanese government, Japanese government doesn't have probably authority to, restrict the free speech, I do not understand why TV stations, the private TV station, hires, such woman, and her daughter is actually a journalist, who comments on the Middle East. She is introduced as, the specialist of the Middle East.
Right? What can I say? They are private outfit. I wonder what is the reason for this. Either it's ignorance, or maybe they hold particularly leftist views, because sometimes there is some kind of leftist ideology, extreme communist socialist that regarded terrorism in the 1970s, the extreme extremist organization in Japan. The Japanese army was aligned with PLO and other terrorist organizations.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
The West, but it was regarded as a general fight against Western values. Now, that shouldn't be the case, because now the Cold War is over. But still, you have groups that are, because there is this belief that somehow Israel is an extension of the U.S. So many times, extremist leftist groups use Israel as a kind of surrogate to attack it. Instead of attacking the U.S., it's too big and strong. It's easier to attack Israel, and they join the chorus against Israel. So this might be, but I do not see why, except for ignorance.
Well, it's not ignorance, because I was looking at photo cameraman, who is in Jerusalem, who works for TBS as well, the same TV company. He has been writing terrible things about Israel. Really, they're laughing, from this, this place where, they can see Gaza and Syria, Gaza, and, they're laughing like colonialists. Hello. He's probably in his 30s, whatever. But, I just do not understand, I just, I wanted to talk about this actually, but, back in 60s, before, the terrorists, the Japanese terrorists were doing all those bad things, terrorist acts, in the Middle East in 70s, there were terrible student movements that people want the public to forget. That's probably the start, and that was that was a major anti-American movement. And it was, the agenda was like, we want peace and no America. That was something like that. And students were pretty much, violent, very violent. They were, throwing venomous, acid towards the riot police, or they were beating, they were like, they were trying to beat up like the riot police as well. They had weapons, and and it was partly because of the Vietnam War and U.S. Japan alliance. They were against it. Like, having the United States base is the cause of the problem. Something like that. But it's not the cause of the problem. We need the base, the U.S. bases in Japan. Like, otherwise, our nation, the entire nation will be in trouble. Like, really, really in bad trouble. But I think that, like, those terrorists, like Husako Shigenobu, she's, considering her age, she's from that era. And so, both my uncles, like, were lecturers at that time. And they were pretty violent. And they were, like, students were like trying to beat up other students who were not participating, the protest or whatever. But I, when I saw Free Palestine movement, in the West, just last year, it was not about free Palestine or a peaceful movement to me, but it was rather more violent, that would, turn to violence against Israeli people or Jewish people. And that was one of the main concerns that I had, really, when I was looking at it. It was very, very scary, So, yeah, like, so, but and at the same time, the Japanese media tends to, talk about Gaza, and what they say is like, with the Israeli airstrike, 20 like children died. Like, they're not certain about the number actually, because they are not there. They get information from Gaza Health Ministry. And I'm sorry to say this, but this is not true. And they call, Israeli, Air Force liars. And because UN is saying it. And, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I just do not understand all those narratives that they can spread around. That's a lie. And
Okay.
it's, and see, like, they document, like, children, like, like, I am so scared of, like, the airstrikes. Actually, see, my grandmother was very old. And, she had airstrikes, during World War II. But, like, when she had 2-ton bomb, right, near her, the land was shaking and she was terrified. But she never thought that she wanted to blame the U.S., for that. Or I lost my aunt in China, but because she was sick. But she wasn't blaming for the U.S. for that, because she was quite angry when the war started. How the war started in the first place, and she was very suspicious of what was going to happen, and it really happened, and she was very angry until the end of the war, and she was not angry at the U.S. military at all. And if I would say, for example, then Hamas fighters are killing innocent IDF soldiers. They do not have to die in Gaza, but they have to go there because to protect the citizens of Israel. And they're not even sorry. Some people.
Are there other issues that you want to bring up in the conversation now?
But sorry.
I'm asking. Are there other issues that we want to bring up in the conversation now?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just, but, I just wanted to say that, Japanese media is just talking, dramatizing too much. That was just my impression. But
I just think because we have a time, it's better to focus on some issues that we want to discuss.
Yes. I would like to ask what you think about Zionism.
Zionism, yes.
Because in my impression, I have an impression myself, but I would like to ask you about it because you're a specialist about it.
So, I would say that Zionism is in some ways similar to other national movements, but in some ways it's very peculiar. So, on one hand, I guess that for someone like for a Japanese, maybe like someone from Britain who has never been actually not in an independent country, maybe there were a few years of after the Second World War, but in history, Japan has always been in Japan. So the Zionism or the Jewish national movement is very different, almost the opposite, in the sense that it is very old. On the one hand, the Jewish people is a very old people, but the actual political presence and in the country has been broken up a long time ago. So basically, we know that there are many nations that have been dominated by others for centuries. For example, Italy was for many centuries divided between other countries and all fiefdoms and kingdoms, and there wasn't a united, Italian state. And the same is true for Poland, which was divided. But even those countries, the population was sitting on the land. So let's say even when Korea was occupied, the Koreans still lived in the same place. However, in the case of the Jewish people, the last independent Jewish state existed almost 2,000 years ago. It was basically conquered by the Roman Empire. And after several rebellions, the Romans gradually killed and deported the majority of the Jewish population. So from about 2,000 years ago, the Jewish people was dispersed among many countries, almost every country in the world, to the point that many people argued, is Judaism really a nation, or is it only a religion? Let's say like Christianity. Christians can be of many nations. So people started to ask, since the Jews are dispersed all over the world, and with time the national language remained as a ceremonial language in prayer, but day-to-day language, it wasn't used anymore. And so, Jews living in Germany spoke German, and Jews living in Spain spoke Spanish, and so on. So there wasn't any precedent really in history, except in the Bible, for people coming back to his country after being exiled. Certainly not after being exiled for almost 2,000 years. So I would say that many people, maybe even the majority of Jews, in the 18th century, the 19th century, assumed the chances for a reformation of a Jewish state were equal. And so many Jews in Europe, in Russia, in America, some of them say we will be eventually assimilated within the general population of these countries. Maybe we will be Frenchmen, like they are Christian French. They can be Jewish Frenchmen or Buddhist Frenchmen, but we will not be a separate people anymore. And however, the problem was that even in places where there were very few Jews, they were often persecuted by majority. Now, until the 18th century, the belief was that anti-Semitism came from the Christian religion. So when modernity came and people became less religious, the general assumption was, as people become less religious, anti-Semitism will disappear because anti-Semitism is based in religion. But actually, that didn't happen. And strangely enough, in Europe, and not only in Europe, the more a country became secular, the more anti-Semitic became. So the people who became later the leaders of Zionism were relatively assimilated Jews from Germany and from France. And they saw, as religion was declining in Germany and in France, as people were becoming more secular and modern, not only anti-Semitism didn't disappear, but there was a new anti-Semitism that was worse than the one before. And why was it? Because anti-Semitism, the old anti-Semitism, was religious. For instance, Christians or Muslims said, if you remain Jewish, you are oppressed. But if you convert and become Christian or Muslim, then there's no problem. We will not persecute you anymore. So in theory, at least, if a Jew wanted to stop persecution, he could convert. But in the 19th century, all kinds of racial ideas, the idea came up that Jews are a race, and so convert, it doesn't matter. They cannot escape from being Jewish. And so several Jews in Europe said, if this is the case, then even if they want, even if they forced you, the Jews cannot really be ever assimilated. And so they will remain either second-class citizens because they are regarded as a different race, or else they will have to move every time from country to country. So finally, several Jews, and mainly one leader, Theodor Herzl, was born in Hungary and grew up in Vienna, said that if no country is able to give the Jews their rights to life and liberty and independence, then they should have their own state. The question, of course, was where should this place go? And Herzl actually created an organization in 1897, so almost 130 years ago. Was called the Zionist organization because Zionism is based on Zion, that is another name for Jerusalem and the land around Jerusalem.
Yes,
So
yes.
so it became every country has a few names. So the land of Israel is also called sometimes the land of Judea or the land of the Jews. And sometimes it's called the land of Zion and so on. So this organization, Herzl started to have meetings with leaders of the great powers and said, it might be in your interest to find some area in the world for the Jews to settle down and create their own state. We the Jews prefer, in general, to return to our own mother country, the land of Israel. However, at that time, the rule of that area was the Ottoman Empire.
Yes.
And it didn't have to do anything. I mean, some of the Ottomans were saying, yeah, maybe we'll accept the Jews are as second-class citizens because they have money, they will come, they will develop the area, but still they will have independence. So Herzl and other groups conducted discussions with the German Empire and the British Empire about various areas possible, even discussing temporary settlement, because Herzl was fearful that there would be a tragedy in Europe, and so he was looking for like a kind of night shelter, a place where Jews could escape to if they're oppressed or persecuted in some place. However, Herzl died very young. He was only 44, and he died in 1904 after only 7 years of activity. And it seems that the idea of Zionism was a dead end because there was no place that was apparently capable of accepting Jews as to become the national home for the Jews. But as maybe history or providence or God, everyone has his own answer, intervened. And in 1914, the First World War started.
Yes.
And two things happened then. One, the French and the British decided that at the end of the war, they would split up the Ottoman Empire. Now, this decision has nothing to do with Jews, but the moment they decided to split up the empire, the possibility of giving to the Jews an area emerged. Because before that, it was Ottoman Empire. Now, it was supposed to be divided between the French and the the French and the British after the war. Then, another issue was that, again, maybe Providence intervened. The Prime Minister of Britain became a politician. A British politician became Prime Minister, and his name was David Lloyd George. And David Lloyd George, by chance or by divine design, who knows, used to be 10 years previous the lawyer of Herzl. So Lloyd George was not Jewish; he was a Christian, but he was very much biblically inspired and knew about the Zionist idea. So he was very well disposed to accept this idea. So when Lloyd George became Prime Minister, the Zionists organized and approached the British government and said, we, the Jewish people, will want to become allies of Great Britain. We want to organize Jewish regiments that will fight along the Allies. And at the end of the war, we will be part of the Allies and we will request an area to create a Jewish state. And so, as you know, the Allies won the First World War. Only few people know that in 1919,
Mm-hmm.
there was the Paris Conference
Mm-hmm.
to decide on the future of the areas of the Ottoman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And so the foreign ministers
Mm-hmm.
of all the allies sat together. And who are the allies? People don't know that Japan was an ally of the West also. So in one room,
Mm-hmm.
in 1919 in Paris, sat the foreign minister of Britain and France
Mm-hmm.
and Italy and the US and Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And these 5 people sat in a room, and the representatives of the Zionist organization came to speak before them and to request that the Allies allot an area of the former Ottoman Empire for a future Jewish national home, basically to build up a Jewish state. And eventually the Italian and the British were very much in favor.
Mm-hmm.
The French was so-and-so.
Mm-hmm.
And the American also said, we don't care otherwhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we are very happy to say that the Japanese representative also did not object. So eventually the Allies, the San Remo conference a year later,
Mm-hmm.
decided that an area
Mm-hmm.
that was defined as Mandat Palestine, so that name does not exist before that. It was created in 1920 as the national home of the Jewish people. And the idea was that there would be Jewish immigration there until Jews create a majority,
Mm-hmm.
and the Arab residents of the area would have all their individual rights,
Mm-hmm.
but as a nation, that would be the home of the Jewish nation.
Mm-hmm.
While the Arabs would have other national states
Mm-hmm.
where they could have a national identity. So in the same way as in many countries you have minorities and there is a majority of one nation, that was advised as the future of the Jewish state.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, in the next 3 decades,
Mm-hmm.
Jews immigrated
Mm-hmm.
to the area
Mm-hmm.
and gradually became about 50% of the population. And during all this time, from the 1920s already,
Mm-hmm.
many Muslims and many Arabs, not only in this area, but all around the world, said that they argued that they are unwilling to give to the Jews even 1 inch.
Mm-hmm.
And they started all kinds of diplomatic and terrorist activities. So even in the 1920s, there were attacks on Jews and terrorist attacks and terrorist organizations.
Yes, I saw.
In 1920, in 1921, then sporadic attacks, and the worst massacres were in 1929, where there were a very famous massacre in Hebron, where actually almost all the community of that city was killed.
Yes.
And in many other places, the Jews weren't killed because they escaped in time. So people don't know that there used to be a Jewish community, a centuries-old Jewish community in Gaza.
Mm.
And there was a synagogue, an ancient synagogue in Gaza, and all those people had to run away in 1929 because of this massive pogrom. And the same in other cities, part of Jerusalem and the city of Nablus and many other places where the Jews had to run away.
Mm.
So this reality created and unfortunately the British, a bit like UNIFIL and UNWRA, just sat on the side and didn't do anything. So this created the realization for the Jews that we will have to organize in some way our own self-defense. And in the 20s and 30s, Jews started to organize self-defense units called the Haganah, or defense. And this is the predecessor to the Israeli Defense Forces. The defense part in the middle is the source of the name of the IDF today is those small groups. Then gradually in the 30s, the Arab international pressure made the British start to turn down more and more Jewish immigrants that wanted to come to the land of Israel, to the point that unfortunately in the 30s, many Jews that were being persecuted by the Nazis couldn't run away from Germany or other European nations to Israel because they were not allowed to run away. And unfortunately, millions of them died in the Holocaust. So many Jews and many Zionists say if the Jewish state, if Israel would have been founded not in 1948, but let's say 10 years earlier, it would have been an opportunity for saving so many other Jews. So, but eventually, the conflicts between the Arabs and the Jews in the area became stronger and stronger. And in 1948, the British said that they are going to leave the area that they controlled in May 1948, and they gave over the decision about the future of the area to the UN. So the UN decided Resolution 194 in November 1947. So in 2 weeks, it will be 77 years to the resolution. And the resolution was to have a partition of this area. About half. Half of it as a Jewish state, half of it as an Arab state, and I would say maybe 5%, the area of Jerusalem and Jaffa should have remained an international area administered by the UN. So this was the resolution, and the Zionist movement didn't like it, but said we will accept it in order to have a state and to find a peaceful resolution to this conflict. So basically, the Zionism accepted the partition plan, the UN partition plan, that was voted by a majority of UN members. However, the Arabs, both the Arabs in Israel and the Arab countries, refused to accept the partition, and they said that on the day that the British will leave, they will invade the Jewish state. So there was no other option for Israelis to organize, and indeed on the 15th of May 1948, a day earlier, a Jewish state had been declared.
Yes.
The Jews Jewish state. But the point is now, the Arabs did not declare an Arab state. They did not do it. Until this day, they didn't declare it. Why? Why didn't they declare their own state alongside Israel? Because they didn't want a state. They didn't want a state alongside Israel. They want to destroy the Jewish state. So the Arabs in Israel invited all the Arabs from the other countries. So the 7 members of the Arab League, meaning Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen, all these 7 countries sent armies into Israel to destroy this Jewish state one day after it was born.
Yes, right, yeah.
And with heroic struggles, Israel won the war.
Yes.
Not only it won the war, but we succeeded in conquering areas that were not initially intended as areas for the Jewish state. Even with that, about 25% of the area of the mandate remained in Arab hands. After the end of the war in 1949, the Egyptians controlled the Gaza Strip, and the Jordanians controlled what is called West Bank. And this included East Jerusalem, with the Wailing Wall, with the Temple Mount. All this was controlled by Jordan and by Egypt. Now the question again, why in 1949 the Palestinians did not create a Palestinian state in these areas? Israel wasn't there, but they didn't want an Arab state. They simply wanted to destroy Israel. So from that time to this, so this is how Zionism created Israel. And very, very rapidly, Jewish refugees from Europe escaping from the Nazis, or from Arab countries escaping persecution and so on and so forth, or for the Soviet Union, came to Israel, and the population in 1948 was only 600,000 people. Today, there are about 10 million Israelis. About 80% of them are Jews, and 20% are Arabs and other minorities. And it's very important to understand, many people have, because there are all these false propaganda items that say Israel apartheid and so on, it is nonsense. Arab Israelis have had the vote since 1948. They have Knesset members being elected. They have Arab parties. They have freedom of speech and absolutely civil rights that are equal to any other citizen in the state. And Israel has thrived from them. However, the Arabs, so-called Palestinians, haven't, because their goal has remained to this day. The goal is not, let's have our own state and build it up. But to this point, when some Arab area achieves some kind of self-government, like Gaza under Hamas, instead of saying, we will try to be the Singapore of the Middle East, let's build up this area, Gaza, let's have industry, let's have culture, let's have agriculture. Instead of it, they only organize themselves to destroy Israel. They take the money that countries like Japan and America
they built terror tunnels, the longest tunnel in the world, and they stored weapons all over our school hospitals.
All the money that Japan is sending Gaza for humanitarian help is actually used to build a terror infrastructure. One of the examples, everyone can look it up on Google. One of the problems in Gaza is that they do not have fresh water. What is the reason? Why don't they have fresh water? Because they could have desalinization plant. Is because every time that pipes for water are laid down, the terrorists film themselves, they dig up these pipes and make them into, they shoot missiles with them. So
stupid.
Basically, they are destroying the sources for their own population. Their own children, their own mothers cannot drink the water because there are no pipes, because they are using it only to destroy Israel.
Yeah, see, that's the point. That's another thing.
This is repeated. Not, you could say maybe the Hamas are crazy people and all the other ones are okay. But it's the same thing in Hezbollah in Lebanon, the same thing with Palestinian Authority, the same thing in many other places. Instead of building up for their own, it is like a kind of crazy regime. The nearest example I can give is North Korea. So the same thing, a regime that is starving and leaves its citizens without food, without clean water, many times cold in the winter, only to build more and more an army that is bigger and bigger. That is, unfortunately, the situation with Israel and its neighbors, and that is the story of Zionism. How to this day we have not found the opportunity to settle peacefully in the area, and we are always obliged to fight, because basically the problem with the majority of Arabs and the majority of Muslims, according to their worldview, they do not accept the existence of a Jewish state among them. That is the sad situation, and so we have no way of existing without fighting repeatedly for our lives. Every few years after independence, again, we were attacked, and we had to fight in 1956, a war against Egypt. And again in 67, a war against Egypt and Jordan and Syria. And in 73, the Yom Kippur War against Syria and Egypt. And 82 in Lebanon, and even now. So every 2 or 3 or 5 years or 10 years, the terrorists and their allies built up, again, with money from Japan and from Europe, from many good people that think they are giving money for refugees, they think they are giving money for humanitarian causes. Probably people in Japan think that they are giving money for Palestinians to go to school, or to help with the water, or to build an hospital, and they don't know that underneath the hospital, a whole terroristic base is being built. And the money that the Japanese and the European and the American is donating to these organizations is actually building more death, more terrorism. Unfortunately, that is the situation.
That's sad, and you mentioned the water system. Is like they say, like the news media say, like Israel is shutting down the water system. I know it's a lie, but they say that way.
But look, all the humanitarian problems, so-called, in Gaza are basically created by the terrorists, because it is. Think for a moment that in 1945, instead of after the nuclear bombs were thrown, instead of surrendering, the Japanese government would have said, no, you will go on, fight, and everyone will enter a tunnel and kill an American when he can. So what would have been the result? That the bombing would have continued, and people in Japan would have starved. There would be for years and years, because right? So this is unfortunately the situation in Gaza, where some crazy people are seeing their own people being destroyed, and instead of saying, okay, we have to give their arms up, leave, and then the humanitarian situation and the food and the water will be solved in 10 minutes. Because there is no problem with food and water. There is problem that when you try to put water into Gaza, the terrorists attack you or use the food. They take all the food and they sell it in order to buy more weapons and so on. So basically, Israel has offered several times for the Hamas fighters, terrorists, to surrender, and they can leave Gaza unhurt wherever they want to go. Turkey, Qatar, whatever, whoever wants to have them. And that would mean an immediate end to the suffering of the local population. Unfortunately, to this day, Hamas is refusing to do that, and refusing to free the hostages, and refusing to give its own population a chance. So when we watch a building being destroyed in Gaza after some terrorist shot a missile from there to houses in Tel Aviv, we have to understand that the real culprit is not the Israeli army fighting, because everyone would shoot at someone that's shooting at him. The real culprit are the terrorists who are continuing a war that they cannot win.
Mm.
Germany and Italy and Japan,
Yeah.
during the Second World War, there is a point where they understand that they cannot win. So there is no point in going on. And the war could have maybe continued until 1947 in Japan. And another 10 or 20 million Japanese would have died. And it would have achieved nothing. So unfortunately, that is the situation in Gaza. So all the accusations about civilians being hurt or humanitarian problems or problems with food and so on, and the war not ending, these problems are created by the refusal of the terrorists to say, okay, it's enough, we surrender, and let's finish this war in 5 minutes.
Well, see, like, I got so many hateful comments at the beginning of the war, after Hezbollah started the war against Israel on October 8th. I got just so many hateful comments, but it's like...
By the way, it's important to note one thing. Hamas attacked Israel on 7 October, and Israel retaliated until Hamas. Israel didn't attack anyone else. The war in Lebanon was absolutely started on the Hezbollah initiative, meaning Israel and Lebanon had nothing at all to do with Hamas. It is the decision of Tehran to use Hezbollah and the Houthis and other militias all over the region to harass Israel. But we have to understand, Israel did not invade Lebanon. Hezbollah for almost 1 year shot rockets at Israel and created tens of thousands of Israelis who are refugees in their own country. They had to move from their houses near the border because they were attacked. So the war in Gaza was provoked by the Hamas terrorists, but the war in Lebanon is not connected to that. It's simply a decision by Hezbollah, by the terrorists, backed by Iran, to attack Israel. Nothing to do at all with Lebanon, really. Nothing to do at all with Gaza. Just with this ideology of harassing and destroying Israel.
Well, actually, a few days after October 7th, there was an Iranian officer, who answered the interview of NHK. And I did not exactly, hear what he said, but he said, Iran gave webinar to Hamas, which is a lie, another lie. They fund, they arm, they arm Hamas. They teach how to attack. It's just awful. It's just it's an awful lie, and they come all the way to Japan and lie, and all those things, like Israel is initiating the war against us, and we are we meaning Iran is open for negotiation, which is not true. So I just do not have words. But anyways, you mentioned you're very knowledgeable about Herzl. I read about Herzl a little while ago. I was very, very impressed actually with his ideology. And there is a prehistoric era in Japan, for example. And, there's nobody can prove how Japan started. It's something like that,
Yes.
But, there's Japan here,
Yes.
And Well, there is in the historian, who compiled history, but from the era of deity, Japan, was created by deity. I'm not talking in right wing, agenda, but it's how um, the history is created in Japan. So, so, so I would, I was very mesmerized, by Herzl's idea, and there was like, like strange people like attacking me on social media. So, well, I don't know what they
But
do, but
you know that Herzl
mm-hmm.
regarded himself simply as another, let's say, another example or another round of the same Jewish idea that existed before in biblical times and so on. So he basically said that the first Zionist was Moses, who took people from the bondage in Egypt and came over to Israel. And the same again in this after the first exile, the Israelite state, the ancient Israelite state, was destroyed by the Babylonians. And after a period of Babylonian exile, there was a return for for another time. So Herzl basically said that Zionism, although it's a modern ideology, it's I would say its model is actually the biblical idea of the return of the Jewish people to their homes. So
Yes.
in one way, it's a very new movement, but on the other hand, a very old one. And the same with some of the aspects of, as I said, Zionism are similar to other countries, but some are very unusual. The fact that Jews came basically from almost every country around the world, speaking different languages,
Yes.
and at the beginning of Zionism, there was a lot of debate about what language should people in Israel speak, because to begin with, people were coming from America, from Germany, from many countries, and each one was speaking another language. So people said maybe we should have the language that is most international. Maybe we should have the language that is spoken by most people. And the reason was that almost no one believed that it is possible to revive the Hebrew language, because there is no precedent in all of history of a language that was used and became dead and then resuscitated or revived. But because of the efforts, the Zionists educators created a network of schools where little children were being taught Hebrew from kindergarten. The teachers were speaking with the children only in Hebrew. And so a whole generation of kids grew up speaking Hebrew. And so this miracle that linguists all over the world said, this cannot be done, it's impossible. Nowhere in the world, some countries like Ireland, the Irish language is even is barely spoken in Ireland, and they have been trying to revive it for a century. And most of the Irish today speak English. They don't speak Irish. The Irish is spoken maybe by 5% of the population.
Yeah.
So everyone said it's impossible to have millions of people speak Hebrew as their mother language again. But this was actually achieved, and these Jewish immigrants from 140 countries came to Israel and basically slowly created a Jewish majority in Israel. But also now, most Jews around the world live in Israel, meaning Israel, let's say 100 years ago, maybe 5% of Jews lived in Israel. Now, more than 50%. So in this way, it is a kind of repeated miracle. And another strange thing is that Israel is the only country in the world, the only developed country in the world, that has above replacement level of birth rate, meaning all over the world, in Japan, in China, Germany, in the US, the people are having very few children. But in Israel, actually, the average is still 3 children per family. So this is the average. Where in most countries today, it's 1.5, the average.
Yes.
So this means that the Jewish population in Israel is growing all the time, even though all other developed, economically, culturally developed countries are facing the opposite situation. So that is why I'm saying Israel is in some sense a very modern country, but in some other ways, it's a very unusual place.
Well, in my impression, not just in Israel, like I have known American Jews, they have more children. But yeah. I don't know why, but I have met.
Actually, that's not true. American Jews have as few children as Americans, and German Jews as few children as Germans. Actually, only the Israeli Jews have a very high. Somehow, when you come to Israel, you want to have babies. Who knows why? But this is the fact that an American Jewish family has an average of 1.2, 1.3 children. But an American Jewish family that comes to Israel suddenly has 2 or 3 children.
I see.
It's a very interesting cultural phenomenon.
Well,
because again, Israel has a very rich population. The GDP is very high. It has the most educated population in the world.
Yes.
I mean, Israel has the largest number. So all these characteristics in other countries, the more one is educated, the more one is wealthy, he has less children. So you see the movement all over the world. Only in Israel, it's not happening.
That's very interesting, but
yes, I agree. There are many attempts to solve why the reason is. So some say that is because maybe it's true that we are a country in conflict, and conflict usually, sociologically, it means that people want to have more children. Another explanation is the Jewish religion's, I would say, concentration on family rather than, the people think that Christians go to church and Muslims go to the mosque and Jews go to synagogue. But in truth, the center of the Jewish religion is not the synagogue, but the home. The most important events in the Jewish year are in the home. The Passover meal is in home, and the huts that are built, or the Chanukiah, the Chanukiah candles are lit at the home. So it's a home-centered tradition that sees value in having a large family. So in a sense, I'm making things, simplifying, but it's true. In Judaism, it's not really about personal salvation. Meaning, in Christianity and in Islam, you save your own soul. It's you and God. But in Judaism, the Jewish people as a whole is the exist in the relationship with God. So you have not only a duty, personal duty, to be devout, but also a personal duty to have family, to have children, to continue your tradition. So this kind of worldview, I think, is part of the explanation. Well, I wrote some articles on it.
Well, it's good that Israel's growing.
We think so.
Japan should do something about it.
Yes, but it's not a specific problem in Japan. We know that Japan has a situation that is very similar to South Korea, to
Yeah.
China,
Yeah,
but even in
yeah.
Italy or Spain or Germany now the situation is a very low birth rate, and usually the answer is that the liberal outlook on life is very individualist, and and individualism means that children are a bother to your way of life. So so if it was only Japan, you could say it's a problem of Japanese culture, but it isn't a problem of Japanese culture. You have the same thing not only in Europe and America, but even in the Middle East. The birth rate in countries like Turkey and Iran is very close to the Japanese one. Is less than replacement level. People think that probably Iran has a lot of children, probably those countries, but it's not true. A lot of countries that are in South America, Brazil, Iran, and all those countries have actually below replacement level birth rate, and the many sociologists are asking themselves about this.
I see. Well, well, yeah. I think I made you talk a lot. And it was very interesting to hear. And probably like I should let you go now.
Sure. Uh, I enjoyed very much speaking to you,
Yeah.
and if
I do
you're
too.
interested in the future to speak again, I will be glad to come again
Oh, yes,
on your
please,
podcast.
please do. Yes. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye. what Dr. Haivry told me during the interview was indeed very meaningful. A lot of foreigners say that the Japanese are heiwaboke, which means that Japan has forgotten the memory of the wars. To be honest, I don't care for the terms, and I do not think that the expression reflects the reality of Japan. Also, I'll add that there were many colonial wars that Japan had in the past. In my opinion, because of the media, Japanese people are too blind to the world affairs, especially the wars. This is what the media is doing to people right now. Japan is one of the major countries that send UNWRA aids. If the Japanese media are in the narrative that the U.S. weapons are killing people, Japan is helping Hamas and Hezbollah create rockets and other weapons to brutally murder innocent Israelis every single day. So this problem of October 7th or before October 7th, actually, are not irrelevant to the Japanese. They also like to, by the way, the media like to target Bibi Netanyahu. Also, Dr. John Spencer, chair of urban warfare studies, is targeted for some reason. It's just, I just do not know what to say anymore. Well, he belonged to U.S. Army, and he was in Iraqi war, but he's not speaking on behalf of the Israeli government. He's a researcher, and he is authorized to have access to the war zones for official reasons, to access data. I was listening to like one commentator on Sunday, and she was like talking about Dr. Spencer, obviously, and now she wanted to say, well, like, he's a liar. Well, I wanted to say she runs a humanitarian agency, which helps people in need. But at the same time, as Dr. Haivry was saying, these people benefit from getting government financial what would I say? Government financial